Before anyone ever earns the title of serial killer, there's always a beginning, a very first time, the night when violence crosses the line from thought to reality, and someone's name becomes the start of a pattern. Now, these are their stories, the lives that mark the start of something far darker. Hey guys, it's Andrew. Welcome to Scary Mysteries. Here are 5 first victims, the true beginnings of evil. Number 5, Richard Stetson.
None of the forensic dentists had seen a case before in which there had been a bite mark with slashing and cutting through it as if to hide the bite mark. That's what the law calls a signature crime. That is, it is done in a way that is very unique.
It was August 22nd of 1982, and the seaside city of Portland, Maine was winding down from the last stretch of summer. At 11 years old, Richard Stetson was the kind of kid you'd see everywhere around town. In that part of the Northeast, the children get restless in the winter, so they soak up the warmer months outside as much as they can. And he lived in a neighborhood near Payson Park, a place that felt too ordinary for anything bad to happen. That evening, Richard told his parents he was just going out for a jog around Back Cove, a popular trail just a few blocks away. It wasn't anything unusual. He'd done it plenty of times before. He left around 6:15 p.m., wearing a red t-shirt, blue running shorts, and his white sneaks. He never came home. By nightfall, his parents started calling around. Friends, neighbors, anyone who might have seen him, but nobody had. At 10 p.m., they called the authorities to let them know. The next morning at first light, search teams fanned out along the cove. And then, just after sunrise, a jogger spotted something in the brush in a wooded area just off the trail. It was Richard. He was lying face down, his shirt torn, and signs of strangulation across his neck. His hands were bound, and the medical examiner later confirmed what everybody already knew. This wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. There was a killer in this quiet New England spot. And for Portland, the idea of a child being targeted like this just didn't make sense to most. On top of that, there were no suspects. Police collected fibers, some shoe prints, and impressions in the dirt, evidence that would sit in files for years before it really meant anything. And for a long time, it didn't. The case slowly went cold, and people moved on with their lives as a community does, but for those who knew the kid, it was always somewhere in the back of their minds. As it turns out, Richard wasn't the only victim of the madman who did this. 18 months later, hundreds of miles away, another boy, 13-year-old Danny Eberly, disappeared in Bellevue, Nebraska. Then another, 12-year-old Christopher Walden in Omaha. When police finally got the man responsible in January of 1984, his name was John Jubert. He was a 20-year-old Air Force radar tech stationed at Offutt Air Force Base. In his locker, investigators found rope identical to the fibers from all 3 crime scenes. And the FBI later confirmed the same rope pattern tied to Richard Stetson's murder back in Maine. And Jubert confessed to killing both Nebraska boys but denied the Maine case. That is, until the evidence forced the connection. The timing put him right there, and he then admitted he had followed Richard that night. He waited until the boy was deep into the trail alone, tackled him, and strangled him to silence the screams. And then he just left the body there, hidden just off the path. And Jubert was executed by the electric chair in 1996. For Portland, the name Richard Stetson would never fade, and not because of how he died, but because his death revealed what the world was dealing with. A serial killer whose violence began with an 11-year-old boy out for an evening jog. Richard, he was the first. Number 4, Zung Nok Tu. Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, May 12, 1981, and the spring semester was coming to an end. Campus lawns were dotted with students, books half open but their minds already on summer. Among them was 25-year-old graduate student Zung Nok Tu, quiet, focused, and kind. She was from Vietnam, and one of the many international students who came to Cornell chasing opportunity. And she took her studies seriously, spent her days in the lab, her nights in study groups, and always seemed to be moving with a purpose, a woman with plans. That Tuesday evening, she was in her usual rhythm. Around 8 p.m., Zung left a study session and walked toward her apartment just off campus. It was still light out, spring dusk falling slow over Ithaca's hills. She cut through BB Lake, a popular shortcut that carved behind a gorge and over a small bridge. And she was seen there by 2 other students, and that was the last anyone saw her alive. When Zung didn't show up for class the next day and she couldn't be reached, professors called the police. Cornell's campus security began a sweep, checking dorms, classrooms, and paths through the gorge. It didn't take long. Just before noon on May 13th, a staff member noticed something at the base of the Fall Creek Gorge, near a narrow trail below the bridge. It was a body. Investigators climbed down the embankment and found Zung's remains among the rocks. Her clothes were torn, and it was immediately clear this was no accident, as she had been assaulted, strangled, and then dumped into that gorge. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death as manual strangulation, so the attacker had used his hands. No one in the academic world around her could point to a culprit. Ithaca was filled with Ivy League students, after all, not killers. And so, the case went unsolved for years, filed as an isolated campus tragedy, as if someone waltzed into town, murdered, and then left. But that's not exactly how it all played out. Because 3 years later and 200 miles away in Connecticut, young women began to vanish again. Between 1983 and 84, the small towns of eastern Connecticut were haunted by a string of murders. And just like Zung, they were college students and young women found in rural fields and along back roads, all strangled. And the killer moved like a ghost, always just out of reach. When police finally caught him, he wasn't just a random drifter. No, he walked amongst the elites. His name was Michael Bruce Ross. He was 21 years old when he killed Zung, a fellow Cornell graduate and former resident advisor. During questioning when he was 25 years old, police were stunned when Ross admitted to 8 murders in total. 4 in Connecticut, 2 in New York, 1 in Massachusetts, and 1 more he couldn't quite remember. When investigators traced his timeline backward through his college years, well, everything lined up. He had been on campus the same night Zung disappeared. He knew the paths around BB Lake, and when confronted, Ross confessed. She was his first victim. He explained to detectives that he had followed her along the path, attacked her, and strangled her after she tried to fight him off. He left her body near the gorge, the same place where days later she was found. Zung's murder was where it began, before anyone had heard the name the Roadside Strangler, before anyone in Connecticut knew who was moving into their town. Michael Ross was executed by lethal injection on May 13th of 2005, exactly 24 years to the day after Zung was discovered. The countdown is on. The holiday shopping season is officially here. Uncommon Goods takes the stress out of gifting with thousands of unique, high-quality finds you won't see anywhere else. So don't wait. The most meaningful gifts get scooped up fast, and now's the perfect time to cross names off your list. Uncommon Goods looks for products that are high quality, unique, and often handmade or made in the US. Many are crafted by independent artists and small businesses, making every gift feel meaningful and truly one of a kind. My mother-in-law paints, so I got her this beautiful handmade paintbrush holder. It's simple but personal, like something she'll actually use every day. And my cousin, he's obsessed with making focaccia. So I found this cast iron garlic roaster and these bread and oil plates that look straight out of an Italian farmhouse. That's what I love about Uncommon Goods. Every gift feels personal. You're not just buying something off a shelf, you're finding pieces made with thought, things that make people feel seen. Uncommon Goods has something for everyone, so don't wait. Cross those names off your list before the rush. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/scary. That's uncommongoods.com/scary for 15% off. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. Number 3, Heidi Balch.
Police are investigating at least 17 murders in connection with 34-year-old Joel Rifkin of East Meadow. Now, after what started as a routine traffic stop by 2 state troopers and ended with a gruesome discovery.
New York City in 1989 was gritty and raw, and every day the hum of 1,000 lives crossed paths without ever noticing one another. And that's exactly how New Yorkers liked it. Heidi Balch was 25 years old at the time. Born in New Jersey, she left home young after her parents divorced and a strained relationship with her father. From there, the city streets called to her. There were opportunities in the bright lights of NYC, and of course, fun times to be had. She drifted between jobs at first, but they never stuck. Eventually, she fell into addiction. But she wasn't lost, not completely. And friends remembered her as the one who could find light in the middle of all the chaos. She'd tell them she was saving up to get clean, maybe even go back to school, and they all believed her. On April 5th that year, she got into a car with a male client outside Manhattan's Port Authority bus terminal. That stretch of 8th Avenue was known to be pretty grimy, still is. But back then it was known for quick transactions, cheap motels, and people trying not to be seen. The man behind the wheel was polite and timid even. His name was Joel Rifkin. He was 30 years old and forgettable in terms of just looking like an average guy. Now, Heidi didn't know it at the time, but she was his first. The two drove back to Rifkin's mother's house in East Meadow, Long Island, where he lived down in the basement. He paid her, they did their thing, and then, in a moment Rifkin later described as a rush of anger, he snapped. He said she mocked him and called him names and laughed at him. So he grabbed her by the neck and just squeezed hard until she stopped moving. He left her body in that basement for a few hours while he made a plan and got the tools he needed. And from there, he then dismembered her, using an X-Acto knife and saw, wrapping the parts up in garbage bags. Her head he placed in a paint can and sealed it up. Her legs and torso went into separate trash bags. Just a few days later, on April 8th, a fisherman near Hopewell Junction, New York, saw something floating in the water by the riverbank. It was a paint can, and inside, the severed head of a woman with dark hair. Police had no name for her, so they just called her Jane Doe Hopewell Junction. Months later, her hands and feet were found along the East River in Brooklyn, but still, no ID, no story. Just another unsolved case in a city that had a bunch of them. And for years, she remained a mystery, and Rifkin, well, went on to kill at least 16 more women over the next 4 years, all ladies from New York and Long Island. He targeted women who worked the streets that he figured no one would miss. And he was finally caught by accident in June of '93 and pulled over for driving without a license plate. In the back of his truck, police found the decomposing body of Tiffany Briscani, his final victim. In custody, Rifkin confessed to everything, one by one naming his victims and describing the scenes in disturbing detail. And when he got to the first one, he called her Susie, said he'd met her at Port Authority in '89, and he couldn't remember her real name. And for more than 2 decades, the identity of Susie remained unknown, until 2013 when police matched missing persons data to that Jane Doe case from Hopewell Junction. The DNA confirmed it. Susie was Heidi Balch. It took 24 years to give her back her name. She wasn't just the first victim of Joel Rifkin. He was the beginning of a nightmare that would stretch across the city, proof that the monsters who blend in are often the hardest to see. Number 2, Anthony Walgate.
Stephen Port had caused immense distress to the families of his victims because of the wicked and monstrous lies he'd told in court to cover his tracks. When he told him, "You will die in prison," there was applause and cheering from the public gallery.
June 19th, 2014, in London, England. Anthony Walgate was a 23-year-old aspiring fashion designer, student, and part-time escort. And he had dreams that went far beyond the East London skyline outside his dorm window. He'd moved from Hull to study fashion at the University of the Arts London and was building a portfolio that he hoped would take him somewhere big. But like a lot of students in expensive cities, well, Anthony needed money. So sometimes he met clients online, and carefully and quietly he wanted to keep this part of his life separate as much as he could from his academic life. And that's how he met Stephen Port. Now, Port was 39, a chef by trade, living in a flat on Cook Street in Barking. On the surface, he was normal enough, maybe a little awkward, which is why he had trouble with his relationships and sought them out online. But behind that, something darker had been building for years. And he perused dating apps all the time, lured young men with promises of money or companionship, and then used GHB, a powerful sedative, to knock them unconscious. On June 19th, 2014, Port contacted Anthony through an escort site and agreed to pay him €800 for an overnight arrangement. Anthony texted a friend the details. "Meeting a client," he said. "We'll let you know when I'm home." Just after 4 a.m. on June 19th, Port made a call to emergency services. And his voice was calm, steady. Said he'd found a young man collapsed outside his flat, that he didn't know him, that he just discovered the body on his way out.
Emergency ambulance, what's the address of the emergency?
Cook Street. There's a young boy. Looks like he's collapsed outside. I don't know.
Outside of which number?
4758.
Sorry?
4758, I think.
47, Cook Street.
When police arrived, they found Anthony Walgate lying unconscious near the entrance of 40 Cook Street. A small blue bottle was beside him. Paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. And the cause? A GHB overdose. And the police believed Port's story, and they treated it as an accidental overdose. They never searched the flat, and never questioned why Port's call came from inside the very building where Anthony's body lay. Days later, officers did learn that Anthony was a registered escort, and that Port had been his final client. They even arrested him briefly for lying to police about how he knew Anthony, but instead of treating it as murder, they charged him only with perverting the course of justice for giving a false statement, and he was out within months. Then, it happened again. Between 2014 and 2015, 3 more young men, Gabriel Carvari, Daniel Whitworth, and Jack Taylor, were found dead within yards of Port's flat, all with eerily similar details. GHB in their systems, bottles nearby, and no signs of struggle. Each was ruled unexplained or self-inflicted. It wasn't the cops that broke this case wide open. It took the families of the young men to begin connecting the dots online and demanding answers. And with their push, investigators finally saw what they had missed: a serial predator hiding right in front of them. When police eventually searched Port's laptop, they felt almost stupid for missing what they did. And he had been researching drug dosages, reading about the effects of GHB, and watching videos of men being rendered unconscious. Anthony Walgate's death, the one the system brushed off, had been the first, and had they connected it then, there wouldn't be 3 others. Stephen Port was convicted in 2016 of 4 murders, including Anthony's, and sentenced to life without parole. Number 1. Crystal Dozier.
The only thing I want to say is that I'm sorry. I know that might not sound like much, but I truly am sorry from the bottom of my heart. I know it's not a lot, but that's all I can give.
East Cleveland, May of 2007. Crystal Dozier was 38 years old, a mother of 7, trying to keep a grip on her life. Her family said she was funny when she let her guard down, stubborn when she needed to be, and that Cleveland was hard on people like her. Easy to get lost, even easier to get overlooked. As she drifted between places on the city's east side that spring, the last firm sighting put her near East 105th Street, a few blocks from where the streets thin out into rows of beat-up houses and boarded porches. Now, she didn't come home, and so her family reported her missing. There wasn't much else they could do, no real story to tell. And through the summer of that year, the months turned over without answers. Police had little to work with, no car, no phone to ping, no camera catching the last block she walked on. So on paper, in the police files, really she became just a line of description and a date. People in the neighborhood kept moving as they do. Nights went quiet and life returned to normal, at least for a little bit. By 2008, though, other women on the east side began disappearing. Different ages, but similar lives, same general area. In 2009, residents near 12205 Imperial Avenue started complaining of a smell. It drifted across backyards and through open windows. The city crews blamed a nearby sausage plant. Then the excuses shifted to sewers. And no one tracked the odor to its real source, at least not yet. On Thursday, October 29th of 2009, Cleveland detectives went to 12205 Imperial to serve a warrant for something totally unrelated to the missing women. Only it was about to connect them in a way police didn't expect. The man they were looking for was 50-year-old Anthony Sowell, a former Marine who lived in the upstairs rooms of the Peeling duplex. He wasn't there when they arrived, but the smell was. Inside, the air was heavy and damp, and flies drifted around, pinging off of light bulbs. In a third-floor room, officers found decomposed remains. A search warrant opened up the rest. A skull in the basement, plastic-wrapped bundles tucked in crawl spaces, shallow graves in the backyard, one under a freshly poured slab. By the end of that day and into the next, the count reached 11 women. Neighbors stood behind crime scene tape and said the same thing. "We told you about the smell." Sowell was arrested on October 31st, picked up a few blocks away, calm when they walked him to the cruiser. And over the next weeks, the coroner's office worked the identifications as DNA and dental records came in. The families waited for phone calls that nobody wants. One of those calls went to Crystal's people, and her remains were on the property. DNA confirmed her in May of 2010. And Crystal's name holds a specific place in that list because of the timeline. She was the earliest disappearance tied to that house, May 2007, the first known in a series that would run through 2009. The others followed, women last seen in 08 and 09, most from within a few miles of Imperial Ave. The MO was always simple: meet, assault, strangle, hide, then repeat. And no authority figure seemed to care. Sowell's background made the story harder to process, not easier. And he joined the U.S. Marine Corps in the late 70s, earned commendations, and came home to Cleveland, drifting through jobs. In 1989, was convicted of assaulting a woman. He served 15 years for that. He was out by 05 and moved into Imperial. From the street, he looked like a vet trying to get by, but inside, the house was a different reality. At trial in 2011, prosecutors laid out the pattern in careful lines. A house used as storage for the dead, while the living walked past the porch out front. Jurors toured the property. The word first was never a headline in court, but it was there in the notes. Crystal Dozier was where the timeline began. Soule was convicted of aggravated murder and sentenced to death, and he died of illness in prison in 2021. And so there were 5 first victims, the true beginnings of evil. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. If you did, then remember to subscribe because we put out 2 new episodes each and every week. Now stay safe out there. I'll see you guys over in the next one.